Hello, thanks very much for joining us today on The Interview. We're meeting someone with a family history that links him to one of the most notorious periods in recent history, the Holocaust. Rudolf Höss was born in Stuttgart in Germany in the 1960s, but at the age of 12, he made a shocking discovery. His own grandfather was not just a high-ranking member of the Nazi SS, he had also been the longest-serving commander of the Auschwitz concentration camp, Rudolf Höss. Rudolf Höss has made it his personal mission to reveal the true story and to speak out about what he sees as the ever-present danger of a resurgence of far-right ideology. He does so in his book, which is being published in French right now. The title translates as The Commander's Legacy. Rudolf Höss, thanks very much for joining us here on France 24.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start off just by talking about your family's history. Can you tell us how you discovered who your grandfather was and how you felt about that?
It was when I was a boy, I was sent to a boarding school. And we had a gardener there. So after the mistake I made as a young boy, we had to go there for our consequences, to work for him in his area. Mm-hmm. And he was a survivor of Auschwitz. So he was one of the 30 gardeners which were recruited by my grandmother and my grandfather out of the camp. So and when he got the list of the delinquents from the director, he asked back the secretary who is the name of his father. So he wanted to get sure that I'm the right person. So and the secretary asked him back and said, okay, it's Hans-Jürgen. So immediately the revenge was planned for him. So it starts that beats me up and a lot of trouble, and I had no clue why. So and on the end, a teacher in my school, he cleaned up the situation, and he asked why he has not to stay like the other kids who got their stuff for 2 weeks. Why had he to stay for 3 months? And he said, yeah, he not obeyed, he not worked very well, he was always screaming and do not a job good. So it was exactly the same what my grandfather and my grandmother told him in his youth when he was like a labor camp guy. So and then this German teacher took me to Dachau. He asked me before and said, do you want to know who your grandfather was? So, but as a child, 11, 12 years, it was more important for me to sit on his motorbike or his BMW. So we went to Dachau, and it was the first time that I put a foot on a concentration camp. I had no clue what a concentration camp is at all. So we went in, and you join in the gate where it's Arbeit macht frei. And on the right side, there starts all the barracks. And we joined in, and the first plaques on the wall was Rudolf Höss, commandant of the biggest extermination camp in the middle of the 20th century. I was completely shocked. So we turned around, we went back to the boarding school, and I called my father and asked him, what happens with our name? He said, oh, boy, it's a mistake. So it's called Hess, so they make a spelling mistake. And for me as a young boy, it was clear I can trust my parents, I can trust my father, so I never think about it.
But it turned out, of course, that your family were lying to you. And I understand that most of your family currently still, they oppose your stance, which is to speak out, as you are doing, about your family's history. You've also taken it even further and met with survivors of Auschwitz, forged friendships. Why do you meet with Auschwitz survivors, and what do you tell them?
First of all, I want to meet these survivors to get more information about what happens at Auschwitz. Not what happens about my grandfather, only the whole complex of Auschwitz, the whole situation there. And out of these meetings became a friendship with several survivors. And
they accept you?
Yeah. I never had any problems, so they wish me luck for my way, and they helped me in many ways to came up with my activism against the far right.
Well, in terms of your activism against the far right, I know that you speak to children in secondary schools. You've also taken part quite recently in a campaign aimed at targeting the resurgence of populist and far right sentiment here in Europe during elections. It's called Never Forget to Vote. Can you just tell us briefly about what that campaign is and why you're involved?
It was created by young social democrats from Sweden in an age between 15 and 20. And it was such an honor that they asked me. So they wanted to go away from the normal stuff of election campaigns and clips. And they asked me if I want to participate in it. And they want to go a completely different way. Well, they had a lot of trouble in Sweden with the far right. So they are growing and getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting more dangerous now in Sweden.
And what do you tell people then as part of this campaign?
About the past. So my way is talking about the past in the present for the future. So,
and how clear do you see those parallels as being currently? Because with the rise of populism, not just in Europe but around the world, many people have started to talk about a resurgence of what we had in the 1930s in Europe.
I think there is no change in at all what they say, how they act, but everything goes much faster than before.
And who would you be talking about when you say they?
We have Le Pen here in France. We have Farage, like UKIP in England. We have AfD in Germany, NPD. So we have now two right-wing parties in Germany, more or less dangerous. And I think they are growing, or they grow the last years silently. And the old government said it's a minority, don't take care about, so no problem. And it was a part in the votes of the European election why the Swedish youngsters called me. 5 years ago, we had only 3, 4, 5 seats in the European Union with right-wingers. Now we have 172 seats. And that in a time period of 5, 6 years. So what happens to the next election? Did we have the half of it with right-wing movements?
Well, a lot of those parties that you cited, all of them, in fact, do take a very strong anti-immigration stance. And we have to point out that this does come in a context where we have had several years of high level of almost uncontrolled immigration into Europe. It is true that in German cities, some German cities, such as Cologne, for example, there's been a massive influx in the numbers. Now, in terms of putting pressure on communities to support that extra number of people, it is true that pressure is being felt. How much can we classify concern about that as being extremist? Because it is impacting on people's daily lives.
Of course it is. But I think on the end, in end of the 50s, the German government took the Turkish and the Italian people to Germany to work there. So nobody takes care about, nobody was interested in. It was okay. Now we have the population, and I think it grows with the stuff of Islamic State. And I think it's dangerous to share all these Muslims on one head, like we did with the Jews in the Third Reich. Of course, we have terrorists coming with the refugees coming to all the states in Europe.
Well, some people say the answer is to not accept anybody. Shut the borders. Put up a fence.
I think that's stupid. Absolutely stupid. We are one of the biggest deliverers for weapons, as well like France, like Great Britain. So we make a lot of billions with all these stuff in countries like in Syria, Afghanistan. And now it's like a revenge. All that stuff comes back in form of refugees. People, they fled from a country which we deliver weapons. We ignore it as well for the last years. We only were interested to make money with it.
And before we move on from talking about Germany, Angela Merkel has said she's going to be up for election again later this year. She has recalibrated her stance towards immigration, toughened it to a degree. Do you think, briefly, she's on the right path?
Yeah. and I hope she will win the election. Well, for me, I'm not a politician or really interested in politicians as well, or politics. But she took it on a point that we had to take care about refugees. Well, after the war, without the Americans, Germany would not still exist right now. So, and that we have that we counted now and said, okay, approximately on 200,000, 300,000 a year. It gives us more safety, but not safety about that we have terrorists. Well, terrorists, they come and go like they want. So that had nothing to do with the refugees.
If we just have a brief word about the United States, President Trump has only just been sworn in a couple of days ago. He's being accused by many voices of a kind of populism that a lot of people have compared directly to Adolf Hitler. Now, some people say it's a bit too easy to just call somebody a Nazi when you don't like what they're saying. What's your view?
I think his way to act is not like a president. His way to act is like a businessman. So he will now act in the States like a businessman and rule America like a businessman. But on the end, I'm sure he will lose. At all. What he is doing, well, I'm not seeing him as a president. It was Obama. For me, he was a president.
A lot of Trump supporters want to export Trumpism, to put it that way, to Europe. They want to see Marine Le Pen elected in France. They want to see the AfD do well in Germany.
Yeah, but I'm sure in Germany, AfD will not win that race. And I hope in France as well, Le Pen will not win that race.
All right. Thanks so much for coming in to see us here at France 24, sharing your views on all of those different topics. A reminder for our viewers that Rudolf Höss is publishing his book in French right now. It's called L'héritage du commandant, le petit-fils du commandant d'Auschwitz raconte, or The Legacy of the Commander. Thanks so much for watching the interview, and do stay tuned to France 24.